I don't know where each group is.
Like library, auditorium.
Yeah, there's gotta be another place though.
Yeah.
That's only 3.
Because I know the gym is for seniors.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's something better than nothing. I mean, my niece and nephew go to Nicolay, and so they're not even in school yet. So homecoming, like they have sports, but they don't have school, which is so strange. And they're not. I mean, so for homecoming, they're not doing anything at all because they're not even in school for it. So I know other schools would love to have some sort of experience. So hopefully. So, if you guys look at the warm-up questions, asking guys about positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and then also undefined slope. And I don't know if you guys have ever, I know those of you guys who had me for algebra have seen slope dude.
Yes.
We can watch slope dude.
I laughed the whole time.
It was just funny.
And so slope dude, if you've never heard of it, is like the world's first quality video, but it's funny because it's so bad. A math teacher makes a video about slope. So I will pull that up.
Just slow. Just fine. Going up and down. Just dropping.
Different apparently versions of slope we hear.
Dude, that's the main slope.
It's grammar.
Right. So I think it's from I don't know, it's probably I remember seeing this video probably it was 10 years ago. So this is an old video, which is partly why it's so good, is because it's bad. Because the technology is not really there. But the concepts are there, and for whatever reason, it's really hard to forget about once you've heard about slope dude. Yeah, right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
This is life-changing. Okay.
It's slow.
Welcome to the adventure of Slope Dude. Meet Slope Dude. He loves to ski. We are going to follow him and he'll teach us some important aspects of slope. This is the course of skiing today. Again, what he says will teach us about slope. You need to remember that Slope Dude always skis toward the right for each
Thank
loop.
you.
When he starts out, he's going uphill. It's hard work. He says puff, puff, positive as he moves up the mountainside. Puff, puff, positive. Puff, puff, positive. Puff, puff, positive. Now he's at the top. It was puff, puff, positive all the way up the mountain. But now he can look forward to the downhill. On the way down the mountain, he says, nice, negative. Nice, negative. And now, after the downhill, he's in for the hardest part of the ski run, the long, flat part. He says, this is zero fun. This is zero fun. This is zero fun. This is zero fun. And as he finishes the flat part, he doesn't see well ahead. All of a sudden, he comes to the edge of a cliff. It's straight down. So frightened is he that he says the worst curse word possible in math and in algebra. Undefined. This has been the adventure of Slope Dude. Remember always what he said during his ski trip. Up the hill or up the slope, he said, puff, puff, positive. On his downhill run, he said, nice, negative. On the long, flat part of the course, he said, this is zero fun. And finally, when he went over the vertical cliff and went straight down, he yelled the worst curse word of math and algebra, undefined. The uphill is the slope of the positive number, the downhill is the slope of the negative number, the flat part is the slope of zero, and the straight up and down or vertical part is undefined. This has been the adventure of Slope Dude. Thanks for viewing.
So I had a student once who
Natalie, does more than catch errors.
who told me about that, and I mean, you can't ever let it leave your head after that. Partly because the guy is like, the voice is so like, I don't know, like monotone or whatever. But the ideas are good in the video. I mean, there's not, obviously there's maybe some things you want to argue that, you know, going flat is the most boring part.
No, that's the fun part.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like, oh my.
you know, there's the idea that maybe climbing uphill would be really tough, but, the good things about it, let me, and Slope Dude has 400,000 views, so Slope Dude's kind of trending.
No.
It's kind of a big deal. So, the ideas though there are hopefully helpful. So, a positive slope, Slope Dude says puff puff positive. Now one of the things about the video is, I don't know if they say it in that video, but Slope Dude always travels to the east. So we have to have perspective on this because otherwise, depending on your perspective, you could think an uphill is actually a downhill. So a positive slope is going uphill. So you picture someone like hiking uphill, going that way, going up the hill to try and, you know, get up to the top. So puff, puff, positive. Then our negative slope is our nice negative. And so that's going downhill. So that's like if you were going sledding. So his nice negative, which is the creepiest way to say that ever. But you get the idea and you remember it. Zero slope is if I told you, let's go sledding outside, and we went onto like the flat part of the yard back here, and you'd say this is zero fun. No fun. Oops, I'm gonna write that over. So zero slope. Little mad face. And then undefined is if I told you to go sledding off the side of the building, which wouldn't be a good idea, not a smart move. So it's like you're falling, so you are like, they say you're swearing in math. And undefined would be a vertical line. You're basically falling off the cliff. So those different concepts are going to be important today in what we're talking about in terms of slope. And like I said, you guys have probably heard, I mean, you've done slope before. I know you've done it in algebra. The big one that people get confused about is zero versus undefined, the difference between those, because they're so similar, but that kind of a confusing concept. So one of the things with zero slope versus undefined, slope is always rise over run. So actually, let's we'll talk about it right now. So rise over run is our slope. If I get a zero as my answer, in a fraction, where did the zero show up? So I get a zero as an answer. If I have a fraction, where is the zero in the fraction? What do you think? On the top. So the zero is on the top. Because that's like if I take like over some number. So if I have 0 cookies and I divide them amongst our whole class, how much do we get? 0. Not very nice of me to bring up cookies because now we all want cookies. But if I have 0 cookies, we all get 0 cookies. The other, and if you ever asked Siri about this, the other one is when you divide a whole bunch of cookies amongst 0 people. That doesn't really make any sense. I can't bring a whole plate of cookies and then say, no one's getting these and now they're gone, like, or whatever, or like, what's gonna happen to the cookies? That's an undefined statement or an undefined situation. So we are confused. So when you have a number over 0, that's where you get undefined. And so when it is an undefined slope, you have to say that. So you can't just leave it as a number over 0. So making sure that's really clear, so you can write undefined, even though it's a math swear word, it's okay. Now when you drop your books in the hallway, you should yell undefined instead of another swear word. So we are going to talk about slope here. Oops, why does it keep going away? Come on. There we go. So slope is a formula. We can use rise over run as our slope. And what they mean by rise over run is how much the graph goes up and down by how much it goes left or right. So what we do with slope on a graph is we kind of change it into like little steps. So rather than being like a small incline, we would change it to steps. So we talk about how much it goes up and over as we like go up the hill, rise over run. Or there's also a formula. Now you're going to notice this formula has some similarities with distance formula. That's not a coincidence. The distance formula and slope actually have a lot of connections, and there's a reason why they're similar. The slope is talking about how the y's change. So the change in y, so the difference between the y's, over the distance, the difference between the x's. So that's our other equation. This is a formula you're going to want to memorize. And when we talk about slope, they also use the letter m. I once used to think it had some sort of meaning in like Latin or something, and I looked it up and there's no meaning. It's just they chose m. So I had a vote one day and picked m. So this needs to be memorized. So make sure you guys know that. And when we talk about slope, we're talking about how steep the line is. So, and I don't know if this is really a word, but will hopefully make sense. Is like the steepness of a line. Now in summer school, I taught, we had a summer school biking class, so we'd go biking around Brandon Lake in the area and stuff, and we would always talk about like, should we take the hill way? Like, should we take the steep hill? And I mean, when you're thinking about a bike ride, whether or not the hill is going to be steep is important. Like, I mean, if I'm riding up a really steep hill, I probably want to know that ahead of time so that I know to change gears or I know to pedal harder or whatever it happens to be. Or going downhill that I know I want to brake or I want to be careful as I'm going down. So how steep a line is important. Same thing if you were on a run or even a hike. We talk about how steep a line is. So we're going to figure out slope using our slope formula. So they want us to find the slope of these points and then write it in symbolist form. So that means we're going to simplify the fraction. So as we do this, just like we do with distance formula, we call that our first x and our first y, and then our second x and our second y. And we're going to use the formula I just said for you guys to memorize to find that slope. So these ones you wouldn't want to graph. Now I guess you could if you wanted to use graph paper to kind of figure out slope. It's probably a little bit easier just to go about doing the formula. Now I don't want these as a decimal. I want them in simplest form if they're a fraction. So I'm going to do y2 minus y1. Just be careful with those negatives. So negative 5 minus a negative 2. Over negative 3 minus 6. So negative 5 minus the negative 2 becomes negative 5 plus 2. So negative 5 plus 2 is a negative 3. And then negative 3, negative 6 is going to be a negative 9. And then we can simplify that. Negative 3 over negative 9 would be what? Yeah, positive 1/3. The two negatives become a positive, and then just be 1/3. You can divide both 3 and 9 by 3. So that would be our slope, and then everyone would have the same slope of 1/3. And if your calculator gives you a decimal, again, instead of putting this into your calculator, I would stop here and just think about what you can divide each of those numbers by, instead of like depending on your calculator for that. All right, so let's look at this next one and then talk about from a graph as well. So 7 minus a negative 1, y2 minus y1, and then negative 3 minus a negative 1. Just be really careful about all the different signs. It becomes 7 plus 1, negative 3 plus 1, I get 8 over negative 2. So I'm going to simplify that to be what? 8 over negative 2. Negative 4. You can just write that without a fraction, or you can write it as a fraction. Now, with the negative symbol, just so you guys know, the negative could be on the top or the bottom. These mean the same thing. They just can't be in both places. If it's in both places, it actually becomes a positive. And a lot of times the book will just write it kind of out in front of the fraction, like if you saw it as a fraction. So just know that those are all the same thing. The last thing here that we'll do for a minute, and then we'll grab whiteboards to have a little bit of a break from notes. We're going to look at the slope from a graph. Now, I drew some dots on our graph to make sure we were all looking at the lines exactly the same way. So line A is on my graph is this red one here. So line A. So if you guys look, I put some dots on line A just so we were all comparing the same dots. Because sometimes it might look a little bit like you might choose something different than me because it kind of goes through that spot. So I would stick to points that are already there. So again, slope dude travels only eastward. So what do we already know about line A? Just by looking at, what's that? It's gonna be what? Sorry. Line A is gonna be what kind of line? Yep. Negative. So we already know it's going to be a negative answer because it's going downhill. So we know for sure it's going to be a negative answer because it's going downhill, nice negative. That's just good to know going into it in case I make a mistake as I'm going. So we want to use that rise over the run. So what I want to do is go from left to right. So I'm going to go from this dot to this one, and I'm going to kind of make a step out of it. So I'm going to say, rise or run, I'm going to go I'm going to rise. I'm actually going to go down. And I have to count how many blocks I go down. I'm not counting the lines. That's kind of confusing. It's better to count the spaces. So I think I go down 8. Do you guys agree? So down 8. And then we're going to run across. Oh, sorry. Since I went down, that's where the negative came from. Does that make sense? I'm going downhill, negative. But then I'm going across. I believe it's 8 as well. But now this time's to the right, so that's going to be a positive 8. So negative 8 over positive 8 is really just going to be what? Negative 1. So line A has a slope of negative 1. So our nice negative slope of negative 1. Now you might have said, well, why didn't you just go down 1 over 1 to begin with? You could have. I just couldn't tell exactly if those points were exact. So I like sticking with the points that are labeled on there for us. Now we're gonna look at line B, which is down here. Now, one of the things I should notice is that B is less steep than line C. So if I were talking about this in terms of a hill, this would be puff puff positive as well, but this one's gonna be even a bigger slope because of the fact that it's steeper. So just kind of being aware of that and kind of making sure your answer makes some sort of sense. So we're looking at B here, and again, I'm gonna stick with the points they gave us. So I'm going from left to right. Do I go up or down to start? Up. I go up 1, and so that'd be a positive 1. And then I'm coming across 4, so positive 4 as well. So up 1 over 4, it would be our slope. That's very simplified. And that makes sense that it'd be positive because we're going uphill. And then finally, letter C here. Again, they have a couple points pretty close together there. Again, I know that this is also going to be positive, but it should be a bigger number because it's a steeper line. So if you were telling me to hike up that hill or ride my bike up, like that, I don't know, you could ride your bike up. It's pretty steep. So that'd be something that's a lot steeper, so the number should be bigger. So in letter C here, again, I'm going up first. It looks like just up 2, and then over 1. So just be 2 over 1. All right, so we're gonna grab whiteboards and practice slope a little bit before we move on to something a little bit tougher with the slope. So if the first 2 rows over there wanna grab next couple rows, guys. No, she usually does kind of one mile, we did a harvest. And all the time, and she, I didn't know, you don't need to write it down. Oh, you didn't get, sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. She will have a copy of it, but I can give you. Otherwise, I also have one that's right. Yeah, or take them both. I always have extra.
Just take all of them.
Thanks, Will. All right, sorry, yeah, go ahead with you guys. All right, so on the boards, we're gonna do some slope problems and just kind of practicing finding the slope from 2 points. Make sure you have a working marker. If your marker's not working, you can get a new one. Otherwise, if it's completely dead, just throw it out. It's more annoying to grab them and then they're not working. All right, so let's find the slope between. We'll kind of start maybe what I consider kind of easy, hopefully. Find the slope between these two. Make sure you simplify if needed. Yeah, that's it. Yep, that's it. Yes, good work. Yep, good work. Close, Will, not quite. Yes. Yep. No, you didn't put the x's together and the y's together. You could combine the opposite, like you put the x with the y. Yeah, got it. A little careful. I think you switch the order. So if you go 0 minus 3, then you have to go 5. You have to stick with the same order. Whatever order you decide on in the beginning, like which one you're starting with and which one you're ending with, you have to stick with that. Yep. Yep. Yes. Okay, looks like a couple of you guys are stuck, and I'll explain it here in a second. Yep. So if this is not something, yes, you're good. So if you're not figuring this, yes, good work. So we do 0 minus 3, but if I go that way, I have to continue to go that same direction. If you decided to start going the other way, that's fine. It's just you have to be consistent. Then I go 5 minus 0. 0 minus 3 is a negative 3. Well, I don't know if that's what you lost there. And then 5 minus 0 is going to be positive 5. So negative versus positive is super important. If you're like, oh, I had the right answer, I just had a positive, that's kind of important. If I said, hey, we're going to go on a bike ride, and I just told you to ride uphill the whole way versus downhill, that'd be a big difference. So, I mean, it matters if it's uphill or downhill. All right. So let's do still haven't given you guys any negatives yet here, so hopefully stick with some positives until we're comfortable. Yep. E. No, I think you might subtract the same one. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah, but leave it as an improper fraction. I know, like, what you did was right, it just isn't helpful for slope. Yep. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yep, good work. How we doing, you guys? All right, so in this one, 7 minus 3 over 5 minus 2, so 4 over 3. So that would be our slope, and it just doesn't even need to be simplified. All right, let's try another one. Yeah. And make sure you simplify this one. Yes. Yes. Just simplify those. Careful. So look at where the bigger number is. Should this be here? Okay. Yes. So you can simplify yours. You can simplify yours. Careful. That should be a positive one. And then the 4 is positive as well. Add some negatives in there. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, that's better. because he's divided around 9 divided by 3 is 4. Yes. I think it's 2 negatives and we got positives. But, yeah. All right, so let's talk about this. I saw a few of you guys little mistakes. So we do 1 minus 4 over 0 minus 9. So we get a negative 3 over a negative 9. The two negatives become a positive. Two negatives on top of each other is the positive. And then 3 over 9, they can both be divided by 3. So this is going to be a positive 1/3 slope. So again, going uphill is important to kind of denote that difference. I'm going to throw some negatives in here for you guys here. See how those go. Be careful with the negatives here. The 10 and 3 aren't negative though. Or maybe if it flips. I don't. Yeah, you're good. Close. Yeah. Close. A little bit. I don't know if are you missing something in your final answer? Isn't that a negative? So, but something needs to be.
This,
Or sorry, yeah. No, you're the bottom number is not right. Yeah. Yes. No. Yes. I think yes. Yellow is hard. Yes. 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 So we get to with -8 still. Oh. There you go. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that was good. Yes. Yes. So it wasn't a big thing, but I didn't want to. Yeah, you're good. So yeah, and this one, you guys, the two negatives are always kind of a tough one. So 10 minus 3, and then -8 minus a -5. There's kind of a lot going on there. So 10 minus 3 is 7. -8 minus a -5 becomes -8 plus 5. But it's still going to be a -3 when we're done. Now the negative can be on the top or the bottom. So if you have -7 over 3, that's also okay. Or the negative can be in the middle. It just can't be in both spots. So again, now this is a negative slope. So if you're going downhill, it's actually pretty steep. It's over 2. So the slope would be a steep slope downhill. So let's try a couple more here. No, think about what that should be. We talked about. Think about what this line maybe looks like. No, not quite. You're not quite finished. You tell me something else about it. No. Go further than that. You tell me something else about it. What do you guys know about what would slope dude say in this case? Yeah, you're good. What would slope dude say in this case? Write it on your board. Nope, it's not that kind. You have to go further. You tell me more than just that. There you go. Yes. So nope, it wouldn't equal 5. Yes. Not quite. The other way. I think you subtracted wrong on the bottom there. Nope. There you go. Yep. So guys, a lot of you guys got, yep, I believe so. A lot of you guys got 5 over 0, right? That's okay. 5 over 0 is correct, except on a test I would take off a point for this. Because that's not simplified. What happens if I have 5 cookies and I divide it among 0 people? That's weird. Where'd the cookies go? What do we say about this? What would slope dude say when this happens? Yep. It's undefined. This would be slope dude falling off the side of a cliff. If we think about this as a graph, -2, 5, -2, 10, this would be a vertical line. Slope dude would be like falling to his death here. So that's why he swears. So we say the math swear word undefined. So you do have to say that. So you can't just leave it as 5/0. It definitely doesn't equal 5. If I have 5 cookies and I divide them amongst 0 people, we all don't have 5 cookies. So they vanish. Kind of confusing. All right, let's do one more here. Make sure you simplify. No, 3. Not quite. I think you combined them in the wrong way. Like I think you have X's with Y's. I think you mixed them up. Yes. Yes. Yeah, there you go. Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep. Close. I think you just simplified wrong. You're good to there. And you just simplify. Yep. Can you simplify that, Jacob? Yep. Only thing is now you're missing something. What are you missing? Negative divided by a positive. There you go. So on the bottom you're gonna have, let's talk about this one. So we have -5 minus 0 over 2 minus a -3. Careful. So that's a double negative scenario here. So -5 over 2 plus 3, so over 5. 5 over 5 is 1, except we have a -1 in that case. Okay? You okay? Or can we put boards away? Is that all right? All right, so why doesn't that group over there head back first? We're gonna do a little bit more with slope. We're not gonna finish the notes today, so that means we're gonna alter the homework. So you wanna make sure you're listening as we talk about what the homework's gonna be. Next couple rows, if you guys would like to go. The next couple. And again, if you didn't hear me, I am going to change the homework a bit because we're not going to get all the way through notes. I want to go through the next little section of notes. Because it's kind of a nice break after that point. So we're going to talk about the steepness of line. We kind of started talking about this a little bit already, except it's a little bit confusing in terms of if it's positive or negative as well. So when we're talking about steepness of line, this either means steep uphill or steep downhill. So steep is steep. So if you've ever tried to go downhill, if you're climbing up a wall and then you wouldn't be able to climb down that, that'd be equally difficult. You need to rappel down a very steep wall. So understanding that steepness can be difficult regardless if it's uphill or downhill, but it's also something you have to be aware of. If it's super steep, you want to know that if it's uphill or downhill. So, what we need to do with lines is we have to think about how steep the line based off their absolute value. What does absolute value mean? Do you guys remember that from algebra? What's an absolute value? Anyone remember? So I have like the absolute value of -5. Do you remember what that is? Yeah, Izzy? It's 5. How about the absolute value of 3? Is 3. So it's the positive version of the number. So if you are talking about you owe me $5 or I owe you $5, it's still $5. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. If you have negative $25 in your bank account, it's still $25. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Well, it does matter, but it doesn't matter the value. We're still talking about $25. So it's the positive version of the number. So if I'm talking about how steep something is, so I'm going to compare less steep numbers to more steep. I'm going to kind of have like a range of values here, if you guys can. So over on this board, sorry, those of you guys online, you can't see it, but we'll put it on the smart board in a second here. So I have a whole bunch of different slopes. I think of another one to use. Should we go? Okay. So I have these slopes I wrote on the board. Which one is the less steep slope? Or which one's the steepest slope? Let's start there. Steepest slope. What do you think? 5. Anyone think anything else is steeper? I think there's a steeper one up there, yeah.
-7.
Yeah, -7 is actually the steepest slope. 5 is really steep uphill, because it's 5 over 1. But 7 is going to be even steeper downhill, down 7 over 1. So -7 would actually be the steepest slope up here. So, slope of -7 would be the most steep. Even though it's downhill, that'd be a really steep downhill though. So that'd be the most steep. So then do you guys agree 5 is next? So 5 is the next, less steep. Got those two knocked off. What do you think is next? What's that? 1. So -1 would be less steep than that. Because it'd be actually 1. Okay, do you guys know what these are? So a half and 2/3. Half is 0.5, right? 2/3 is 0.6-ish. So that helps. 0.6, 0.7. So which one's next? Yep. The 0.9. Which one's next? 2/3. After that, -1/2. And which one is the least steep line? Yeah, Lena? 0. 0 is the least steep out of all of these because 0 is just flat and boring. So if you guys notice these numbers, even though there's negatives and positives in here, they go from the smallest number, which would be 0, all the way to the biggest absolute value. So the biggest number up here is actually 7, but I know it's actually a -7, which is confusing, but think about it being steep. So if I'm talking about a very steep line here, going downhill is important. In a couple of weeks, actually, when we have that fall break, I'm going to be gone that Monday and Tuesday after. So I'm taking like my personal days, which mean that I have to be gone from you guys, but they give us a few there like that. And I'm going to run the Grand Canyon, which if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, it's a very steep downhill, and then you run across the bottom and then back up. Actually, the downhill, that really steep downhill, is actually one of the hardest things to train for, because I'll be running downhill for essentially like 7 miles straight, like, so I have to run all the way into the Grand Canyon. So like my quad muscles, like running downhill that long and the pounding on like my feet and my toes is probably going to be one of the worst parts. And so like a lot of times people talk about, oh, it's so steep to climb out of that. Climbing out, I can just take my time. I can go slow, but running downhill and trying not to fall or trip or like, you know, like injure myself that way. So the downhill is actually the toughest. So when we talk about something being steep, it really is important thinking about downhill. Or driving in the mountains, sometimes people's cars act up actually going downhill more than uphill, is because their brakes are struggling to go downhill that far. So we're talking about lines being steeper than one another. So this example says, tell which line is steeper. So again, we don't care if it's uphill or downhill. Which one is more steep? Which one is kind of more dangerous? Like even if it's just a slight difference. So maybe not which one's more fun or which one's easier, it's steeper. So we have to figure out the slopes of each of these lines. So if you haven't done that already, go ahead and do that. We'll start working on them here in a second. And again, if you didn't hear me, we're going to change the homework a little bit. So make sure you're following along when we talk about that. Which one is steeper? So I'm going to do line 1 up here. And first of all, I have to calculate that correctly. So I'm -2 minus a -1. And then 1 minus a -2. So -2 minus a -1 is going to end up being -2 plus 1. And this is going to end up being 1 plus 2. So the slope 1 is -1/3. My first slope. Is that what you guys got too as well? So then the next one. We do -4 minus a -3. And -1 minus a -5. Lots of negatives here. So I get -1/4. All right, now we have to think about fractions. Oh my gosh, which one is bigger? So if you have pizza and you ate 1/3 of a pizza or 1/4 of a pizza, it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. Which one's bigger?
Third.
1/3 is bigger. So thinking about it that way, there's 1/3 versus 1/4. Hopefully that makes sense. So 1/3 is actually a bigger number. Even though it's negative, it's a steeper slope. So -1/3 is going to be our steeper line. That makes sense? Okay. So for our homework, I'm going to change our homework a little bit because we're only about halfway through the notes. We'll do the rest tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a little bit short in class because of the pep rally, so I don't want to plan for too much there. So on your homework, it's gonna be slightly different, so if you can just, you won't need any graph paper. You don't have to worry about that, but, so it's gonna be page 175. We're gonna do 3 through 10 all. And then also 19 through 21 out. So you're kind of ignoring this right now and doing this instead, if that's okay. So make sure you get that written down. I'll put it up here as well. I'll change the on Schoology. I don't think Schoology's up yet. I'll fix it over here in a second. So, typically, next door to work, and she runs here to next door, and I know for sure she wants me to get on Google Meet, she wants to talk to you about something. So, you guys can go next door, there's a Google Meet that then she can start on homework with them. Probably kind of talk with her as well, so Jacob, if you want to go next door, I'll open the door. I'll open up Schoology here in a second, just give me a minute. I'm gonna flip the board off for a second, but it's on the marker board over there if you guys need the pages. Okay, should I email you a Google Meet? Okay, so just open up the pages. Oh, they're not on there. Great. Okay. Hang on a second. All right, guys, they should be on there now. All right. Sorry, I forgot to turn you guys off here.